Chapter 3 Caleb's Best Behavior. Now the moment that you resign yourself to behave, life has a way of presenting a great many opportunities to break that resolution, and thus was poor Caleb's predicament from the very beginning of the day. If Caleb was here he could probably enumerate a great number more temptations to mischief that he faced, but since you are a well-mannered person I doubt any of these opportunities would be of interest to you. However, I would be at a miss if I didn't point out some of the major challenges Caleb faced throughout the day. The first of these challenges occurred just slightly after sunup. They had spent the night in a very small inn near the station, but Caleb's father was insistent they rise early and make it to his sister's for a full English breakfast. So the whole family was packed and waiting outside of the inn for Caleb's uncle to arrive with their family carriage. When he saw the carriage his expression indicated that he thought it was quite ugly, but due to his newfound restraint he held his tongue. His next challenge came at his aunt's house when he discovered a full English breakfast was not something he particularly cared for. In fact, he only cared for about half of it. He ended up sorting things into two piles, one that he intended to eat and one that he did not. The eggs, bacon, and toast with butter were all on the edible side, and after some small sampling the tomatoes and sausages made the cut as well. However, the kippers and black pudding were ejected on sight. This posed a significant problem since his father wouldn't take kindly to a half-eaten meal, and therefore his plans for later in the day were at risk. His salvation was found in a rather old family dog that made a very strategic appearance during the meal. It made a beeline for Caleb's youngest cousin, who was 2.5, and had her plate a little too close to the edge of the table for a house with a dog that likes sausages. As skillfully as a master burglar the dog made his move. Gently, as the girl was distracted with her jammed toast, the dog grabbed the sausage with the tips of his teeth, and quick as a wink it was gone. The dog was preparing for phase 2 of the operation, which involved licking any jam left on the girl's fingers as she looked for her missing sausage. Seeing no other option that would allow his hopes of a magic show to remain intact, Caleb settled in for the task in front of him. He gulped hard, in anticipation of eating something that he would much rather not. But then he started to rationalize his decision. Honestly, who has fish for breakfast? He thought, it's just not right. But right before he acquiesced and began shoveling everything in his mouth as a feat of extreme willpower, another thought occurred to him, and he looked over the side of the table to see where that dog had gotten to. Now a dog this old and clever has a very good sense of what happens when a child has no intention in finishing their breakfast, so Caleb found him waiting patiently at his feet, for the dog knew what was next. Caleb slowly palmed the remainder of his food, slipping it under the table to his eager co-conspirator. Abigail had also divided her plate, but was not nearly so lucky as Caleb. Since she could care less about seeing a magic show, she intended to leave anything she couldn't identify right where it was. Because not everyone had finished, she found herself pushing her breakfast around with her fork. "Abigail," said her mother sternly, "a lady finishes everything on her plate." "But Mom, Caleb," complained Abigail. "A lady doesn't whine either," interrupted her mother. So Abigail was stuck finishing her whole breakfast, grumbling the whole time. Caleb's next challenge was in the form of his cousin Albert, who was 3 months older than him, and thought himself quite superior. Caleb believed the reason for the smugness was the age difference, but it was most likely the fact that Caleb was from the colonies, if anything. While not good at determining the cause of smugness, he felt he did have a very effective way of curing it. Currently Albert was giving Caleb a tour of their home, being sure to point out all the things they had, but Caleb couldn't afford. Then adding after every item, "You do know what that is, don't you?" About halfway through the house Caleb had had his fill of cousin Albert, and decided to settle things the way most boys his age do when they meet someone new that they don't particularly like. "Hey Brit, I've had just about enough of your attitude, and I got a good mind to wallop the tar out of you if you don't knock it off," threatened Caleb. "You looking for a right to do? "Ah, that's a chuckle. You and what army, mate?" snapped back Albert. "The Union Army, with General Grant at the lead," said Caleb, slightly overstepping his diplomatic authority. "Well, they're no match for Lord Nelson and the entire Royal Navy," retorted Albert, but he had failed to consult Parliament on the matter, so his chances of procuring the entire fleet were iffy at best. On top of that, both of the boys' commanders had been dead for quite a while, a fact that neither boy felt was necessary to reveal to each other, so in spite of serious logistical issues, the posthumous field commissions stood. But at this point the dispute had become a matter of national pride. "Either way, I don't need an army to give a runt like you a shiner," threatened Caleb. "It'll be cold coffee if you try it, cold coffee for you," said Albert, trying to sound as intimidating as he could. At that point the boys were quite close, and Caleb snatched up Albert's collar. But just then a distressing thought occurred in his mind. Caleb considered the fact that getting into a fist fight with his cousin may be construed as misbehaving, especially by certain individuals that promised to take him to see a magic show later that afternoon. This left Caleb in quite the dilemma because he couldn't see any way to easily remove himself from his current situation. While he was frozen thinking, Albert saw an opening and landed a solid punch straight on Caleb's nose. While Caleb was surprised, and a little sore, he realized that Albert hadn't been in nearly as many scuffs as he had, and it would be quite easy to best him. However, this was not his main concern. He needed to find a way out of this trouble, and then suddenly an idea came to him like a flash. "Ow! What's wrong with you, you rotten bully? I was just joking around with you, that's all. There was no need to sucker punch a fella, you brute," whined Caleb, as he fell backwards to the ground and put up his hands. Caleb didn't much care to sit on his pride like this, or to let Albert imagine him as such a coward, but he had priorities that outweighed his pride for the moment. Besides, he told himself, he'd sort the whole thing out rightly when they got home from the show this evening. Albert, on the other hand, was quite surprised that he had done so well, especially given the force with which Caleb grabbed his collar. From that day forward, that fight went down as a win in Albert's book. If Caleb kept a book, the fight wouldn't have been mentioned at all. "You're just lucky I don't tell your ma on you for treating a guest so poorly," said Caleb, again swallowing a good helping of pride. "This better be the best magic show ever," he grumbled to himself. Now Abigail's day to that point was much different, with many less opportunities for fist fights with her hosts, mostly because she spent it reading with the family dog, Degree, who was an old sort of mutt but the perfect dog to keep your lap or feet warm. He was a Scotty something mix, but no one could tell what the something else exactly was. Albert insisted that it was wolfhound, but that's only because he really wanted a wolfhound. Besides, he was nowhere near big enough to have wolfhound in him. Abigail didn't care. He was old and kind and very sweet when he curled up next to her on the couch and rested his head on her lap. After a while Abigail's aunt walked by. "I'll be if that dog doesn't have run of this house," she exclaimed. "I told him 1,000 times to keep off of that couch, but every time I see him up there so comfortable I don't have the heart to chase his old bones off of it. Abby, my dear, he isn't disrupting your reading, is he?" "Oh no, Aunt Gertie, not at all. He's just wonderful. I couldn't ask for a better reading companion," said Abigail. She had just started reading a book lent to her by her cousins in London. It was a book about a very bored girl with a fascination with white rabbits. They both said it was one of their favorites, and even popular with the Queen. "What a strange little girl, Degree. She always seems to be talking to herself. I wonder why people in stories tend to do that. It makes no sense." "You wouldn't catch anyone doing that in real life," said Abigail to the dog. Degree looked up at her while she was speaking and she suddenly was very grateful that dogs do not understand irony. When she had finished talking, Degree returned his head to Abigail's lap with a deep sigh. She looked up from her book occasionally. once to see Jenny regaling the kitchen with tales of Vincent, and another time when she heard Caleb and Albert shouting about something in the garden, but it was soon over, and not worth her time to investigate. Abigail was also visited by her little cousin Victoria, who wanted to see what Abigail was reading, and when she saw the pictures she demanded Abigail read some of the book out loud to her. She also got her revenge on poor old Degree for stealing her breakfast, by pushing her way onto Abigail's lap herself, leaving no space for the dog, who was a bit too stubborn to climb off the couch entirely. So he settled to lay his head awkwardly against Abigail's hip. Even when the squirming 2-year-old was read aloud to, she still seemed more interested in the pictures than the story, and soon neither of these could not hold her attention, and she slid off of Abigail's lap to find entertainment elsewhere. Occasionally Abigail would stop reading, as she leaned back to daydream about how her great adventure might start, if it ever did. Perhaps, she thought, great adventures are for other people in other times, and to have a great adventure you must first be a great person, to which these things happen. This thought, however, didn't make her desire to have an adventure of her own any less. Now when things were truly confusing or frustrating to Abigail, she had a very good practice, one I hope you share. God, I really can't make heads or tails of this feeling inside of me, she began. For she had always felt it made good sense to speak to God in a direct fashion, since he already knew her true feelings. Besides, what good would a God be that couldn't see past pretentious words and overly embellished compliments? And if he could see past those things, what is the point of using them? I feel like there is an adventurous spirit inside of me that is being suffocated by this new life my mother is trying to make for me. I know she means well, but must I give up all that I am to become a lady? I feel trapped, so much so that I'm worried that I can never be happy with this ordinary life. It seems unfair, ever so unfair, she prayed. Then a thought occurred to her. A thought that plagues the back of the mind of anyone whom God has placed a truly great desire. Oh God, what if you already gave me my opportunity to have my adventure? What if it was there and I missed it? What if I was distracted or slept in that morning, the morning I was supposed to do something amazing? Or what if when my chance comes I'm too afraid to take it, and it passes me by? Oh God, how horrible, may it never be so. She prayed with all her heart. Now before you worry too much for poor Abigail, I must tell you that God does not purpose desires to us in vain, nor does the proper opportunity to do his will pass unnoticed. But it is often in a way we do not expect, and so it was with Abigail, as she was soon to find out.